He left me alone on our wedding night. But what I heard at midnight changed everything. That night, I sat alone in my wedding gown, staring at the empty doorway where my husband had promised forever. The house was silent, until I heard something at midnight that made my blood run cold. And in that moment, I realized love can be a lie wrapped in lace. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, but as the clock struck midnight, I was sitting alone on the edge of a hotel bed, still wearing my wedding gown. My hands trembled against the satin, and the sound of laughter echoed faintly through the corridor. Not mine, not his. Someone else's. He had told me he'd just step out to make a call. That was 3 hours ago. Now the champagne had gone warm, and the candles were crying wax down to nothing. Then, through the thin wall of our honeymoon suite, I heard it. The soft thud of footsteps. A woman's giggle. And his voice, low and familiar, whispering her name. In that moment, something inside me shattered quietly. Not with anger, but with a kind of disbelief that makes your body forget how to breathe. And baby, I wish I could tell you that what I heard next didn't confirm every fear I'd tried to ignore. But that night, I learned that sometimes love can dress itself up in lies and walk you right down the aisle to your own heartbreak. Baby, if you had seen me back then, you'd think I was the luckiest woman alive. The day I met Daniel, the world felt like it had shifted just a little closer to heaven. He had that kind of smile that made people stop talking mid-sentence, charming, gentle, and a little dangerous, like he knew something the rest of us didn't. We met on an ordinary Sunday morning after church. I was helping Sister Martha fold tablecloths after the fellowship luncheon, and there he was, holding a tray of pies, laughing with the pastor's wife like he'd known everyone for years. He looked up, caught my eye, and baby, he didn't look away. "Need a hand with that?" he asked, pointing to the stack of folded cloths I was trying to balance on one arm. "I think I've got it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but my hands told on me, trembling like they had their own secrets. He chuckled softly. "Well, maybe I'll just walk beside you, in case you don't." That was Daniel. Smooth, patient, the kind of man who never had to chase love because it always seemed to find him first. We talked for hours that day. He told me about his job in real estate, about his dreams of owning a small beach house one day. He listened, really listened when I spoke. I told him about my late mother, about how she taught me to keep love sacred, to never settle for half of someone's heart. He nodded and said something that made me melt. "Grace, if I ever have your heart, I'll guard it like a prayer." And baby, I believed him, every word. The months that followed felt like pages from a fairy tale. He'd surprise me at work with flowers. He'd cook for me, dance with me barefoot in the kitchen. He made me laugh like a little girl again. He met my family. My sister Evelyn whispered to me after dinner one night, "He seems too good to be true, sis." I laughed it off. That's what people say when someone's finally right for you. But looking back now, I can see it. Those small, quiet moments when something in his eyes shifted. When I'd ask him a question, and he'd hesitate before answering. When he'd spend hours on his phone, step outside for business calls. When he started coming home late, smelling faintly of perfume I didn't wear. But back then, I told myself love meant trust. I told myself I was overthinking. Then came the proposal, a sunset picnic at the very beach he said he wanted us to grow old near. He got down on one knee, the waves brushing his shoes, and asked, "Grace, will you make me the happiest man alive?" And Lord help me, I said yes through tears. The ocean clapped against the shore like it was cheering for us. Our families celebrated for weeks. The church was full of laughter, prayers, and gospel songs the morning we said, "I do." I wore my mama's lace veil, and when Daniel lifted it, he looked me dead in the eye and whispered, "You're my forever, if only I had known." Forever for him had an expiration date. Because baby, love isn't always a thunderstorm. Sometimes it's the quiet hum before the lightning strikes. And I didn't see the storm coming. That night, after everyone had gone home and the champagne glasses had been cleared away, Daniel kissed my forehead, told me he needed to handle something real quick, and left me standing alone in a white dress that still smelled of roses. I waited, and waited, and waited. The clock ticked, the candles burned low, and all I could think was, maybe he's planning a surprise. Maybe love still means what it used to mean. But as the hours stretched and his absence grew heavier than the gown I wore, a whisper in my spirit said, Grace, something ain't right. And baby, that whisper was right. Because when midnight came, I didn't hear a door open. I heard laughter through the wall. The clock on the wall read 12:07 a.m. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for a faint, muffled sound that didn't belong there. It wasn't the hum of the fridge or the soft whine of the air vent. No, baby, it was laughter. Low, breathless. The kind of laughter that carries intimacy. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. I'd been sitting there for hours, the soft train of my wedding dress pooled around my feet, the roses on my bouquet turning brittle from neglect. The night had stretched so long it felt like the air itself had stopped breathing, but that laughter, that sound, came again, clearer, a woman's voice, and then a man's, Daniel's. My heart stilled in my chest. I stood slowly, the satin of my gown whispering against the hardwood floor. Every step I took down that hallway sounded like thunder to my ears. The laughter grew louder as I neared the guest room, the one Daniel said we'd use for our honeymoon night since the bedroom upstairs was too full of wedding. Gifts. My hand hovered over the doorknob. My pulse was wild, my breath shallow, my whole body trembling between disbelief and dread. And then I heard it. My name, on another woman's lips. Grace doesn't suspect a thing, she said between giggles. You're terrible, Daniel whispered back, his voice low and teasing. Something inside me shattered. I pushed the door open, slowly, painfully, like I was giving fate one last chance to be kind. But fate didn't blink. It stared right back at me. Candles still burned from earlier, throwing soft golden light across the room. And there they were, Daniel and another woman, tangled in the sheets meant for our wedding night. For a moment, the world fell silent. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat, frantic and hollow. He froze. She gasped. And me? I just stood there. Barefoot now, the hem of my gown brushing against the cold floor, my bouquet slipping from my hand and hitting the ground with a dull, final thud, the roses scattered, red petals bleeding across the white sheets. Grace, wait, Daniel stammered, scrambling upright, the guilt written all over his face. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat felt like glass, sharp, fragile, and ready to break. The woman, a familiar face, one of his co-workers from the office, clutched the sheets to her chest, avoiding my eyes. She had the nerve to whisper, I didn't know you two were married. That was when I found my voice. Soft at first, dead calm. You didn't know? I said, every word trembling with disbelief. You didn't know when you saw me trying on wedding dresses? When you smiled at me during our engagement dinner? You didn't know when you sent me congratulations on Instagram? She turned pale, muttering something I didn't care to hear. Daniel tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said. Don't you dare touch me. His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked small, pathetic. The man who once promised to guard my heart like a prayer was now standing there, begging for forgiveness between the ruins of his own lies. I walked to the dresser, where the framed photo from our engagement sat, his arm around me, both of us smiling like the world was ours. I picked it up, looked at it for a long time, and then I let it fall. The glass shattered across the floor, sharp, glinting pieces catching the candlelight like broken stars. Was any of it real? I whispered. The way you looked at me in church? The promises? The vows? Daniel tried to speak. Grace, please, I didn't mean... You did. I cut him off, my voice shaking but strong. You meant every lie. Every moment you made me feel crazy for asking questions. Every night you stayed out working late. You meant all of it. Tears streamed down my face, hot and relentless. I could taste salt on my lips, feel the weight of every broken dream pressing against my chest. "You left me alone on our wedding night, Daniel," I said. "And for what? For this?" He had no answer. Just silence, the kind of silence that fills the air after a gunshot, when everything living stops to see what's left standing. I turned and walked away. Each step felt like walking through fire, but I didn't look back. When I reached the front door, I paused. The night air outside was cool, heavy with the scent of rain. I stepped out barefoot, leaving the house, the lies, the shame, behind me. The first drops fell just as I reached the end of the driveway. Rain mingled with tears, washing away the last of my makeup, the last trace of that beautiful lie called forever. And as I stood there, in a soaked white dress under a weeping sky, I realized something. The worst kind of betrayal isn't when someone cheats on you. It's when they make you question your worth in the process. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car until dawn, watching the rain trace silver lines across the windshield. I replayed every memory, every kiss, every "I love you," searching for the moment where the truth began to rot beneath the beauty. And when the first light of morning touched the sky, I whispered to myself, he may have broken my heart, but he won't bury me with it. Because even in my pain, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. This was the beginning of my awakening. The morning after that night felt like stepping into a world that no longer recognized me. The sun still rose, but it looked pale, like even the heavens were ashamed to shine over what had happened. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in that ruined white gown. The lace was wrinkled, the hem muddy from where I'd stood outside in the rain. My reflection in the mirror looked like a ghost. Someone I used to know. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from Daniel. "Grace, I'm sorry. Please come home. Let's talk." Home. What a cruel word that felt like now. For the next few days, I stayed at my sister Lillian's house. She lived 20 minutes away, but it felt like another universe. Her home smelled like cinnamon and lavender, warm and safe. She didn't ask many questions at first. She just let me cry, and I did. On her shoulder, in the shower, in bed at 2 a.m. when sleep refused to come. There's a kind of grief no one prepares you for. The grief of losing someone who's still alive. I'd look at my wedding ring sometimes, tracing the circle with my thumb, thinking, this was supposed to mean forever. Now it just felt like a shackle I'd chosen myself. Daniel kept calling, sometimes 5-6 times a day. Then messages, long paragraphs about regret, about mistakes, about how it didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything. Those words echoed in my mind like poison. If it didn't mean anything, why did it destroy everything? Days turned into weeks. The whispers started, from neighbors, from friends. You know how people talk when they don't know the whole truth. She must have done something. Maybe she wasn't enough for him. You know men, they get bored. Each comment sliced deeper than the last. Even when I went out to buy groceries, I felt eyes on me, pity, judgment, like I was the one who'd sinned. And Daniel, he returned to work like nothing happened. People still shook his hand, still smiled at him. Meanwhile, I couldn't even walk into church without feeling like my soul was on trial. One evening, I went back to the house to collect my things. The wedding photo on the wall had been taken down. The flowers I'd left in the vase were dead, their petals dry and colorless, scattered across the table like old promises. Daniel was there, waiting. His eyes were red, his shirt wrinkled. "Grace, please," he said softly. "I made a mistake. I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. I love you." That word, love, it rolled off his tongue so easily, like it still meant something. I wanted to believe him. God knows I did. Because love doesn't just disappear overnight. It lingers, even when it hurts. But then I remembered the sound of that woman's laughter. The look in his eyes when he realized he'd been caught. The way he'd left me sitting alone on what was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. "You don't get to say you love me," I whispered. "Not after what you did." He dropped to his knees, tears in his eyes. "Grace, I'll do anything. Counseling, therapy, please, don't throw us away." I stood there, heart heavy. Because I knew what he didn't. He'd already thrown us away. The night he made that choice, our marriage ended before it even began. I left without another word. After that, I started to change. At first it was subtle. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes, stopped rereading old texts. Then I started cooking again. Not for anyone else, just for me. The smell of cornbread, the warmth of the oven, the hum of gospel music on the radio. Little things that reminded me I was still alive. But every night, when the world went quiet, the loneliness crept back in. It's funny. People think heartbreak is loud. They imagine crying, yelling, breaking things. But the real pain? It's silent. It's lying in bed at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering what you did wrong. One afternoon, I found myself sitting at the park, a place Daniel and I used to go for picnics. The air was crisp, children were laughing in the distance, and I felt like a ghost among the living. Then, an old woman sat beside me. She wore a bright yellow shawl, her eyes kind but sharp. We didn't speak for a while. Then she said quietly, "You look like someone who's trying to remember how to breathe." I turned to her, surprised. "Something like that," I said. She smiled. "I've been there. Don't let one broken man make you forget your worth, baby. Sometimes God removes people because they were blocking your blessing." Her words sank deep. I didn't know her name, but that one sentence, it stayed with me. That night, for the first time since my wedding, I slept peacefully. No nightmares, no tears, just a quiet kind of acceptance. I began to write again, small journal entries, prayers, fragments of thought. Each word felt like stitching a wound, slow, painful, but healing. And slowly, I started to see a new version of myself emerging from the ashes, one who wasn't defined by what she'd lost, but by what she survived. But life wasn't done testing me. Because just when I began to find my peace, Daniel came back, not to apologize, not to heal, but to destroy what little strength I'd built. He showed up one evening at my sister's door, holding papers, divorce documents, with a smug smile that said he'd already moved on. And when I looked closer, I saw her signature too. The woman from that night. That was the moment I broke. Truly broke. Because betrayal from a stranger hurts, but betrayal that turns into arrogance, that steals your dignity and calls it closure, that's a wound that cuts deeper than bone. But that wound, my love, was also the fire that would forge my strength. Because what Daniel didn't know, what no one knew, was that this time, I wasn't going to cry. I was going to rise. When I first held those divorce papers in my trembling hands, it didn't even feel real. The room around me blurred, like I was underwater, drowning in disbelief. Daniel stood there in the doorway, his voice calm, practiced. "Grace, this is for the best. We both need to move on. Move on." He said it like we'd just finished a casual argument, like we hadn't shared vows, promises, dreams. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife deeper, I saw her. The same woman from that night, standing behind him, wearing the same perfume I'd once worn. Her hand slipped into his and my husband's hand. That sight, it hollowed me out. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, completely still, until my knees gave out. Lillian rushed to my side, shouting something I couldn't hear. All I could see was Daniel's face. Pity mixed with guilt, as if he were the one suffering. I remember whispering through the tears, "You didn't just leave me. You buried me alive." That night I locked myself in the guest room. No lights, no food, just silence. The papers lay on the floor beside me, like a grave marker for everything I'd ever believed in. My wedding gown still hung in the closet, white as bone, mocking me. I sat there for hours, maybe days. I don't even remember. Grief had no sense of time. I prayed, but my prayers felt hollow. I cried, but my tears ran dry. At one point, I found myself staring at my reflection in the mirror. Eyes swollen, hair tangled, soul empty. And I whispered, "Who are you now, Grace?" Days blurred into nights. I stopped answering calls, stopped eating, stopped being. My sister tried everything. Hot tea, soft music, even tough love. But I was gone somewhere deep inside myself, trapped in that echoing space where pain drowns out reason. It's strange, baby. When heartbreak truly hits, it doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just hums quietly, a sound only you can hear, like a broken lullaby you can't turn off. Then came the night that changed everything. The house was dark, and rain lashed against the windows. I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt like a memory. Suddenly, I heard a noise outside. A car door, footsteps. My heart pounded. For a second, I thought, maybe he's back. Maybe he changed his mind. I rushed to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and froze. It was Daniel. Standing there in the driveway, kissing her, that woman, like our marriage had never existed. Like I was already forgotten. My breath caught in my throat. The glass felt cold beneath my fingertips as I whispered, I see you now, Daniel, for who you really are. Something inside me cracked open, not like a break, but like a birth. For the first time, my tears didn't come from sadness. They came from clarity. The next morning, I woke with a calm I hadn't felt in months. The kind that comes when you realize there's nothing left to lose. I took off my ring, kissed it softly, and placed it on the kitchen counter. Then I wrote 3 words on a slip of paper. I release you. I folded it and burned it in a candle flame, watching the smoke rise and disappear into the light. That was the moment. Baby, I knew. He might have broken my heart, but he would never own my soul. After that, I started taking small steps. I went for walks again, just me and my thoughts. I sat in the park under the same oak tree where I'd once cried, but this time, I smiled. And one Sunday morning, when I finally returned to church, I sat quietly in the back pew. The choir was singing softly, the organ filling the room with warmth. The pastor spoke about renewal, how sometimes God breaks our hearts not to destroy us, but to rebuild us stronger. I closed my eyes and felt something shift deep inside. A whisper, not from the world, but from within. You are still worthy of love. That was the day my healing began. Not because Daniel said sorry, but because I finally stopped waiting for him to. Later that evening, I took a walk by the lake near my home. The sky was painted in soft gold and lavender, and for the first time, I saw beauty again. The water rippled gently, and I caught my reflection, tired, but alive. I smiled at her. At me, we made it, I whispered. We're still here. And baby, that was everything, because rock bottom isn't the end. It's the ground where you plant your new beginning. It had been 6 months since Daniel left. 6 long months of silence, prayer, and slow healing. The house that once echoed with laughter now held a quiet peace, the kind that comes only after chaos. I'd learned to live without checking the clock for his return, without waiting for messages that never came. But just when I thought the past had finally released me, it knocked right back at my door. That morning, I was sipping coffee by the kitchen window, the same one where I'd once seen him with her. Sunlight poured in gently through the curtains, warming my face. Then came a knock, firm, hesitant. When I opened the door, there he was. Daniel. He looked older, tired. His once polished suit was wrinkled and his eyes, they carried guilt. Grace, he said softly, we need to talk. For a moment, baby, I didn't even recognize the man standing there. This wasn't my husband, not the man I'd loved, not the man who'd promised forever. This was a stranger wearing regret, like a borrowed coat. He stepped inside uninvited, looking around as if searching for the ghost of the life he'd thrown away. You redecorated, he muttered. Yes, I said. I had to make space for peace. He smiled awkwardly, then took a deep breath. She left me, he confessed. The woman you left me for? I asked, my voice calm, almost tender. Yes, he whispered. Turns out she only wanted my money. I lost almost everything. He looked at me then, desperate, lost, like a man who'd just realized he'd set fire to his own home. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. For years, I'd played this scene in my mind, imagining what I'd say if he ever came crawling back. But now that he stood before me, all I felt was peace. "I'm sorry, Grace," he said. "I made a mistake. I should have never left you. Maybe we could try again?" He reached out to touch my hand, and baby, that's when it hit me. The beauty of healing. Because where once I would have melted, now I didn't even flinch. "No, Daniel," I said quietly, stepping back. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, and so did I." He blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled softly, tears threatening but not from pain, from freedom. "I chose to forgive you. Not for you, for me. I chose to love myself the way I once loved you. Completely." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the sound of truth filling the air. Daniel looked down, his lips trembling. "I lost everything, Grace." "No," I said gently. "You lost yourself. Everything else was just decoration." He left soon after, head bowed, shoulders slumped, like a man who'd finally seen the mirror for the first time. I watched him walk down that same driveway he'd once abandoned me on. But this time, I didn't cry. I closed the door, locked it, not to keep anyone out, but to keep my peace in. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Daniel's lawyer. Apparently, in his attempt to win me back, he'd signed over his share of our old property, the house we once owned together. It was now mine, free and clear. I sat there holding that document, smiling through tears. Not because of the house, but because of what it meant. Life had finally come full circle. That weekend, I visited the old home. Dusty windows, cracked paint, but still standing, just like me. I walked through the empty rooms, touching the walls, remembering every laugh, every tear. And then I whispered to the silence, "You were once my prison, but now you're my proof that I survived." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I stood in the backyard. Fireflies glowed like tiny lanterns, and the air smelled like jasmine. I lit a small candle, closed my eyes, and prayed. "Lord, thank you, not for what was taken, but for what was left behind. My strength, my grace, my heart. When I opened my eyes, I felt lighter, not empty, but free. And baby, that's when I realized justice doesn't always come in the form of revenge. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the peace that follows truth. In the stillness that replaces chaos, in the moment you finally look at the person who broke you and feel nothing but grace." 6 months passed after Daniel's visit, and the seasons changed like chapters in a book I finally finished reading. The wounds he left behind had long since stopped bleeding. They had become quiet scars, tender but strong. The mornings felt different now. I'd wake up to the soft hum of birds by my window, sunlight spilling through lace curtains, the scent of freshly brewed coffee dancing through my kitchen. My home was no longer haunted. It was alive. Every room told a story of survival. On the dining table sat a single vase of lilies, my favorite. Their scent reminded me that beauty can bloom even from broken soil. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with my journal, writing down all the things I'd once been afraid to say out loud. Not to anyone else, just to myself. "I forgive you, Grace," I wrote, "for staying too long, for believing too hard, for loving without being loved back." The moment I finished that sentence, tears streamed down my face. Not of pain, but of release. Because healing, baby, isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without hurting. Sometimes I'd walk through the park near my home, a quiet path lined with oak trees that whispered when the wind blew. I'd see couples holding hands, children chasing kites, and older women like me sitting on benches, lost in thought. One day I met a lady named Clara there. She was reading a book I loved, and we struck up a conversation. Turns out she too had survived betrayal. Her story different, but the ache the same. Week by week, we started walking together, talking about faith, love, and how sometimes heartbreak is just heaven's redirection. She said something I'll never forget. Maybe God breaks our hearts not to punish us, but to rebuild them stronger. I smiled, because for the first time in years, that made sense. By spring, I'd started volunteering at the community center, teaching young women how to manage finances, how to build independence, how to walk away when love starts to hurt. I'd stand there in front of them, telling my story in bits and pieces, not to relive the pain, but to remind them they weren't alone. And every time one of them would cry, I'd say softly, "Baby, pain may visit your heart, but it doesn't pay rent there. Don't let it stay longer than it should." One evening, after a long day, I came home to find a small package on my doorstep. It was from Daniel. Inside was a note that read, "Grace, I found peace too. Thank you for forgiving me. You were always the better soul." I sat for a long time holding that note. No tears, no anger, just quiet gratitude, because forgiveness had set me free long before he ever asked for it. That night, I poured myself a cup of tea and stood by the window, the same window where my heartbreak began. Outside, the moon hung heavy in the sky, casting soft light over the garden. And baby, for the first time in so long, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come home. Because I was home, inside myself. Weeks later, on a Sunday morning, I found myself at church. The choir sang Amazing Grace, and as the notes rose up, I felt the air shimmer with something holy. When the pastor said, "You can't rewrite your past, but you can choose how it ends," I smiled through tears, because I'd chosen peace. I'd chosen grace. I'd chosen me. When I stepped out of the church, the sunlight hit my face like a blessing. Children were laughing on the steps. A soft wind stirred the leaves, and I heard my own voice whisper, "You made it? Grace, you really made it." And baby, that's the thing about healing. It doesn't happen all at once. It comes quietly, softly, like a sunrise after the longest night. Baby, let me tell you something. When a person you love walks away from you, especially on a night that was supposed to be your beginning, it feels like the world has ended. It feels like every vow, every promise, every piece of your heart was a lie wrapped in a ribbon. But what I learned is this. Sometimes God lets certain hearts break so ours can finally start beating for the right reason. Ourselves. See? Pain doesn't always come to destroy you. Sometimes it comes to wake you up. It shakes the dust off your soul and says, "Get up, baby. You've been sleeping in someone else's shadow too long." And when you finally rise, you realize something powerful. You never needed their love to shine. You just needed your truth. That wedding night, it used to haunt me. The whispers, the loneliness, the sound of him leaving. But now when I look back, I see it differently. That was the night I stopped being his wife and started becoming Grace, the woman who could smile again, the woman who could pray without crying, the woman who could forgive, not for him, but for her own peace. So if you're listening to me right now, baby, if someone's left you feeling small, forgotten, or unworthy, I want you to breathe, because this pain is not your ending. It's your becoming. You may not see it yet, but one day you'll thank the night that broke you, because it's the same night that built your wings. And when the dawn comes, like it always does, you'll see yourself for who you truly are, whole, beautiful, unbreakable. Sometimes, baby, the wedding night is just a test, to see if your love can survive without an audience. And when it can, that's when grace is born. If my story touched your heart, baby, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to rebuild yourself after a heartbreak? I'd love to hear your story.